In the depths of forbidden lore and whispered demonologies, there exists a name that evokes both fascination and dread. Belial, the demon of lawlessness, pride and liberation. Unlike the horned terrors of conventional horror, Belial does not strike with overwhelming force or blazing fire. He corrupts with promise, he seduces with freedom, he offers the key to unchained ambition, but at the cost of your soul's very foundation. Belial is not merely a demon, he is an archetype, a symbol of mankind's eternal struggle between autonomy and moral decay. Said to be one of the first and most powerful beings cast out of heaven, his name appears in ancient Hebrew texts, apocryphal scriptures, and occult grimoires, consistently associated with worthlessness, rebellion, and vice. But his power lies not in brute destruction, it lies in temptation. He is the subtle whisper in the mind of the desperate, the ambitious, the ones willing to gamble their humanity for greatness. And unlike many demons who serve under a hierarchy or crown, Belial is often depicted as kingless, masterless, a sovereign of his own making. This self-made status has made him a revered symbol in some occult circles, where he is celebrated as the liberator of souls from the tyranny of divine order. His followers, however, often fail to see that what Belial promises as freedom is a poisoned gift, a slow erosion of conscience, a descent into madness paved with victories and rewards. His manifestations in rituals are rarely spectacular. He doesn't arrive in flashes of brimstone or thunder. Instead, those who invoke him speak of a thickening air, an overwhelming sense of presence, and the uncanny clarity of forbidden insight. Belial speaks directly into the mind, not with threats, but with visions. He shows you a version of yourself that could be powerful, untouchable, ungoverned, and then he asks, what will you give to become that person? The rituals to summon Belial vary across grimoires. In the Lesser Key of Solomon, he appears as a mighty king commanding legions, yet requiring offerings, sometimes even sacrifices to speak truthfully. In modern occultism, Belial is often channeled through intense meditation, mirror work, or sigil rites, always demanding that the practitioner approach with absolute intent and emotional clarity. Belial despises weakness. He does not respond to the hesitant or the half-hearted. Those who approach him must know exactly what they want and what they're willing to lose to get it. This demand for emotional commitment is what makes him both dangerous and alluring. In Belial's presence, there is no room for doubt, and this is where the trap is laid. Because once you step into his domain, your desires become your chains, your ambitions, the tools of your own undoing. He guides you not with lies, but with truths twisted just enough to fit your ego. And that is the most insidious kind of manipulation, one that feels like liberation. Historically, Belial has been associated with chaos, not through violence, but through the dissolution of structure. He thrives in systems already cracking, in people already questioning their purpose. His energy is that of the disruptor, the force that makes kings question their thrones and priests doubt their gods. In literature, his presence emerges during moral collapse, social upheaval, and personal crises. His favorite targets are not the weak but the powerful, because only the mighty have something worth corrupting. And once he whispers to them, what follows is often a slow-motion disaster. Empires crumbling from within, leaders brought low by their own unchecked desires, and souls so lost in their own reflection they forget who they were before. In this way, Belial is not just a demon of law. He is a psychological force, a mirror held up to humanity's most dangerous impulses. He asks not for worship, but for alignment, and in aligning with him, we risk stepping off the edge of our own moral cliff. His archetype speaks to the modern condition more than ever, where power is idolized, accountability is fading, and individualism is confused with righteousness. In every era where selfish ambition trumps collective good, Belial's shadow looms, and yet he remains compelling, because who hasn't wished for freedom without consequence? Who hasn't dreamed of power without chains? Belial offers the fulfillment of those wishes. All you have to do is surrender your anchor, your ethics, your compassion, your humanity. And many do, because his deals don't feel like coercion, they feel like opportunity. That is his brilliance and his curse. He teaches us that sometimes the greatest evil doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it only needs to whisper, "You deserve more." In the darker corners of occult tradition, the rituals that invoke Belial are among the most intense, the most psychologically demanding, and the most spiritually treacherous. These are not rites for the curious or casual. They are designed to strip away illusion, not only of the world, but of the self. Practitioners report altered states of consciousness, profound visions, and overwhelming emotional surges, as if Belial were not just a being, but a mirror that reflects your most hidden desires and flaws. Offerings made during these rituals range from the symbolic, blood, fire, sigils, to the unthinkable, depending on the extremity of the cult or the desperation of the summoner. But beyond the theatrics lies something far more sinister: intent. Belial does not answer prayers born of confusion. He responds only to those who burn with desire for freedom, for power, for escape. And in that intensity, he finds his entry point. Cults who revere Belial operate far from the light, not simply to avoid persecution, but because secrecy itself is part of the doctrine. To seek Belial openly is to misunderstand him. His followers believe that truth, like power, must be hidden, protected, hoarded, not shared. These groups often frame him as a champion of independence and inner sovereignty, a force that breaks chains both divine and societal. They see the moral codes of religion as prisons, and Belial as the jailbreak. But herein lies the poison. Because Belial's brand of freedom is freedom without balance, a descent into selfishness dressed as self-realization. Those who walk his path are not empowered in the way they expect. They become consumed. Their victories taste hollow. Their relationships decay. And worst of all, they begin to believe that they are ascending, even as they fall. This is Belial's gift, a delusion so immersive that the victim believes it is enlightenment. He does not need to deceive you. He helps you deceive yourself. And in doing so, he bypasses resistance entirely. The psychological cost of invoking Belial is staggering. Many speak of obsessive thoughts, nightmares, paranoia, or a growing detachment from empathy. The line between willpower and obsession begins to blur, and for some, the ritual never truly ends. His presence lingers. His voice becomes the inner monologue. The practitioner begins to justify actions they once would have condemned. They see betrayal as strategy, cruelty as strength, manipulation as wisdom. And this transformation is not explosive, it's slow. Like rot under a floorboard, you only notice it when it's too late. Philosophically, Belial embodies the tension between chaos and autonomy. Thinkers like Sartre spoke of radical freedom, the idea that we are each responsible for creating our own meaning. But Sartre warned that this freedom must come with responsibility. Belial offers the same freedom, but none of the responsibility. He says, forge your own path, take what you want, but never speaks of the cost. In this way, he is the dark twin of existentialism, freedom, but without ethics, a force that strips away structure and morality until nothing remains but will. Plato's vision of the tripartite soul, reason, spirit, and appetite, is also echoed in Belial's influence. When appetite rules the soul, reason is dethroned. Belial fans the flames of appetite, ambition, lust, power, until they consume the spirit, and so what remains is a hollow self, endlessly chasing more, unable to stop, unwilling to reflect. The danger isn't in summoning Belial. The danger is in believing you've mastered him. He operates through pride, your belief in your own invulnerability, and once you think you are in control, that's when he has you. Unlike other demons who rule through terror, Belial rules through persuasion. He makes you believe every step is your idea. He never shouts, he suggests. He does not bind, he convinces, and that is why those who invoke him are often unaware of how far they've fallen until it's too late. Belial, in the end, is not just a figure of darkness. He is a lens through which we examine our own darkness. He asks us, what are you willing to sacrifice for power? What truths will you abandon to serve your ambition? What lines will you cross if no one is watching? His myth forces us to confront the aspects of ourselves we'd rather ignore, our lust for control, our disdain for limits, our hunger to be gods in our own stories, and in that confrontation lies the true value of Belial, not as an ally, not as an enemy, but as a reflection. He is the voice that says, go further, even when you know the road ends in ruin. And it is only by recognizing that voice and resisting it that we begin to master ourselves. In that struggle, we find the truth behind the myth, that the most dangerous demons are not the ones that break down our doors, but the ones we invite inside. If these themes of temptation, rebellion, and spiritual warfare resonate with you, make sure to subscribe and join us in the next descent as we continue unearthing the forgotten, the forbidden, and the forces that shape the shadow side of humanity. In the quiet aftermath of Belial's psychological siege, something strange begins to unfold. Not chaos, but clarity. A clarity so sharp it cuts through the soul. The practitioners who've passed through his fire report a kind of second sight. The ability to see systems, people, even themselves, in cold, brutal detail. It is not wisdom, it is disillusionment masquerading as insight. Belial's final deception is to make you believe you've emerged stronger, purified by the trials you endured. But what you've actually become is numb, to consequence, to compassion, to doubt. It is here that the spiritual corrosion completes its cycle. No longer plagued by the moral tug-of-war that once defined your choices, you begin to act with impunity. And in a world where moral hesitation has evaporated, the self begins to rewrite reality. This is the realm where former seekers of truth become manipulators of perception, wielding half-truths like weapons, cloaking selfishness in the language of sovereignty. Cultic leaders throughout history, the charismatic, the visionary, the monstrous, often trace their philosophical lineage, knowingly or not, back to this archetype of Belial. The doctrine of do what thou wilt, stripped of nuance, becomes not freedom, but dominion. It births ideologies that glorify conquest, both external and internal. In this space, empathy is weakness, compromise is failure, and the only sin is submission. Belial becomes the banner under which ego marches, cloaked not in red or black, but in enlightenment, a counterfeit gnosis that blinds the seeker while pretending to awaken them. And it's not just the lone practitioner who falls. Entire communities, movements, even civilizations have echoed his shadow. Think of systems that elevate greed to virtue, ruthlessness to strength, autonomy to godhood. They do not worship Belial by name, but they enact his gospel. In modern occult circles, he is not always summoned with circles of salt and Latin invocations. Sometimes he arrives in ideas, in cultural shifts, in the slow normalization of power divorced from responsibility. This is his modern mask, ideology. Belial no longer needs an altar if he can possess a worldview. Consider the rise of nihilistic individualism, where meaning is mocked, Truth is relative, and the only real law is self-interest. It is no surprise that such a landscape is fertile ground for Belial's influence, not through possession, but permission. He does not need to impose, we invite him. Each time we choose domination over dialogue, impulse over insight, gratification over growth. He is not a shadow on the wall, he is the part of us that chooses to shut off the light. In this way, Belial's influence becomes fractal, echoing across levels of being, the personal, the political, the philosophical. He thrives in polarization, in extremes, in the collapse of nuance. His fingerprints are on every crusade waged in the name of freedom that ends in oppression, every movement that begins with liberation and ends with tyranny, because that is his favorite trick, to enter through liberation and exit through domination. And for those who follow him willingly, this isn't failure, it's ascension. The descent is reframed as elevation. They believe they are shedding illusions when they are simply trading one form of blindness for another. In ancient grimoires, Belial is said to grant titles, high offices, and influence over others, but he rarely bestows these gifts cleanly. The price is paid in subtle currency, the erosion of moral clarity, the decay of soul. He gives power but not peace, influence but not fulfillment. His followers rise, only to realize they've climbed a ladder that rests against a collapsing wall, and even then, many do not retreat, because by then they have built their entire identity atop the structure Belial helped them construct. To renounce him would be to renounce the self, and so they dig deeper, pray louder, burn brighter, not realizing that their altar is an open grave. Esoterically, Belial represents the shadow aspect of will, not the divine spark of intention, but its corruption, where will becomes control, clarity becomes cunning, and the sacred fire of agency is turned outward, weaponized. And yet, buried within all of this lies an uncomfortable truth. Belial is not a demon in the classical sense. He is a function, a force, the inevitable outcome of unchecked autonomy, the natural consequence of freedom without structure, passion without principle, ambition without anchor. His name becomes a cipher for a universal pattern, the rise and fall of the self unmoored from the sacred. He is in many ways a spiritual gravity, always pulling toward the self, always distorting the orbit of the soul inward. And in recognizing this, we gain the only weapon that truly resists him: humility. Not submission, not weakness, but humility. The acknowledgement that we are not gods, not unbreakable, not immune to our own shadows, that we must choose again and again to temper our fire with discernment, to wield will as a tool, not as a crown. And perhaps this is Belial's secret role, not merely to tempt, but to teach, to offer the path of unrestrained desire so that we might see its end and turn away. In this view, he becomes the necessary antagonist in the soul's mythic journey, the gatekeeper of ruin whose domain must be crossed to reach wisdom. Like the dark forest in every hero's tale, Belial is the place where we confront what we could become if we lost ourselves. And so the rituals, the visions, the temptations, they are not the danger. The danger is forgetting that they are tests. That every whispered promise of power is a question. Will you trade the sacred for the self? Will you surrender meaning for might? And in answering that question, we do not merely summon or banish Belial, we reveal ourselves. Because he is not a being that appears when the candles are lit. He is already present in every choice, every justification, every moment where we decide whether to serve something greater or serve only ourselves. Belial is the mirror and the mask, the question and the consequence, the fallen throne and the false crown. He will not knock on your door. You will open it, not out of fear, but out of belief. Belief that you are above consequence, that you deserve more, that the rules do not apply to you. And in that belief, you will find his voice, not loud, but familiar. And that's when you'll realize he's been there the whole time.